What if I told you that the person who just finished a marathon last weekend, the one who eats clean, sleeps 8 hours, and never misses a gym session, could be silently walking toward a heart attack right now? Not because they're doing something wrong, but because they're missing something invisible, something that no standard cholesterol test, no basic blood panel, no routine annual checkup will ever catch. And here's the terrifying part. That person might be you. Most people will never understand this. They'll keep running their 5 miles a day, eating their grilled chicken and steamed broccoli, and feel completely invincible, right up until the moment their heart sends a signal so loud, so violent, so final, that no amount of fitness can answer it in time. I'm talking today about something that cardiologists whisper about in conferences, but rarely explain clearly to their patients. I'm talking about the silent risk factors, the invisible architects of cardiac disaster, that hide perfectly behind a healthy exterior, a great-looking body, and a completely normal set of standard lab results. By the end of this video, the way you see your heart and the way you see being healthy will change forever. And I need you to stay until the very last point, because what I'm going to share there is the most important piece of this entire conversation. It could be the thing that saves your life, or the life of someone you love. Before we go any further, if you care about understanding your heart at a deeper level than almost anyone around you, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the notification bell, because what we talk about here goes far beyond generic health advice. This is the science of the heart that chose to spend its entire life with you, and it deserves to be understood. Let's begin. Every single day, someone who looks like the picture of health collapses. A 42-year-old triathlete, a 38-year-old yoga instructor, a 51-year-old executive who runs half marathons on weekends and hasn't touched red meat in a decade. These aren't random tragedies. They're the consequence of a massive systemic blind spot in how we define cardiovascular health. We've been taught, by culture, by medicine, by decades of public health messaging, that the path to a healthy heart is simple. Exercise, eat well, keep your cholesterol low, don't smoke. And all of those things matter, deeply. But they are not the complete picture. They are the visible layer of a much more complex biological story. The heart doesn't care about your abs. It doesn't care about your resting heart rate being 52 beats per minute. It doesn't care that you haven't eaten a potato chip since 2019. The heart lives inside a biochemical environment, a universe of inflammation, oxidative stress, hormonal signals, genetic switches, and vascular architecture that is largely invisible to the naked eye and largely ignored by standard medical testing. And when that environment becomes hostile, even the most disciplined body can become a ticking clock. Here's what most people do. They go to their annual checkup, they get their total cholesterol checked, maybe their LDL and HDL numbers, their blood pressure is taken, and if everything looks normal, they walk out feeling reassured, validated, protected. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Inflammation is the biological language of damage. Your body uses it to signal repair, to fight infection, to respond to injury. But when inflammation becomes chronic, low-grade, persistent, invisible, it doesn't create obvious symptoms. There's no fever, no pain, no red flag that shows up in a standard blood test. What it does do is act like a slow acid on the walls of your arteries. The scientific term you need to know is endothelial dysfunction. The endothelium is the inner lining of your blood vessels, a single layer of cells so delicate and so critical that scientists now call it the largest organ in the body you've never heard of. When chronic inflammation attacks this lining, it becomes sticky, stiff, and vulnerable to plaque formation. This is the real beginning of heart disease. Not cholesterol, not fat, inflammation. And the marker that measures this? High-sensitivity C-reactive protein, or hs-CRP. It is almost never included in a standard blood panel. Your doctor has to specifically order it. The change of perspective here is profound. Being healthy by conventional standards while having chronically elevated inflammatory markers is like having a beautiful house with termites in the walls. Everything looks perfect from the outside. The structure is being consumed from within. The practical exercise is this. Ask your doctor, not request, ask directly and specifically, to include HSCRP in your next blood panel. Also ask about interleukin-6 and fibrinogen if you want a more complete inflammatory picture. Write those 3 names down. Put them in your phone. These are not exotic tests. They are available, relatively inexpensive, and they tell a story that your cholesterol number simply cannot. Here's the common behavior. When someone in a family has a heart attack, the family grieves, time passes, and life goes on. Maybe people say, he always stressed too much, or she never exercised. The genetic signal gets buried under behavioral explanations, and nobody investigates further. This is one of the most dangerous patterns in cardiovascular health. The scientific revelation is this. There is a genetic variant that affects approximately 1 in 500 people in the general population, and much higher rates in certain ethnic groups called familial hypercholesterolemia, or FH. People with FH have a genetic mutation that prevents their body from properly clearing LDL cholesterol from the bloodstream, regardless of diet, regardless of exercise, regardless of lifestyle choices. From birth, their arteries are being exposed to cholesterol levels that can be 3 to 4 times higher than normal. But FH is only one piece of the genetic story. There is also a protein called lipoprotein A, written as LPA, pronounced LP-a. This is perhaps the most underdiagnosed cardiovascular risk factor in the world. LPA is a modified form of LDL cholesterol that is genetically determined. Your diet doesn't affect it, your exercise doesn't change it, your statin medication barely touches it. And elevated LPA dramatically increases the risk of heart attack and stroke, independent of all other risk factors. Approximately 20% of the global population has elevated LPA. That's 1 in 5 people, and the vast majority of them have never been tested. The perspective shift is emotionally significant. Your heart is not just the product of your choices, it is also the product of your inheritance, and that inheritance deserves to be known. Not to create fear, but to create strategy. Because if you know your LPA is elevated, there are specific interventions, nutritional, pharmacological, and emerging gene-based therapies that can meaningfully reduce your risk. The exercise: call your cardiologist or your general practitioner today and ask for a LPA test and a full lipid fractionation panel that goes beyond basic cholesterol. If anyone in your family has had a heart attack before age 55 in men or 65 in women, or if you have a personal history of early cardiovascular events, this test is not optional. It is essential. Here's what disciplined, high-performing people do. They use exercise as a stress management tool. They work out hard, they feel better. They're proud of their resilience. They believe that because they manage stress physically, they are managing it completely. They are wrong. The scientific truth is one of the most striking pieces of behavioral cardiology research to emerge in the last 2 decades. Chronic psychological stress, the kind associated with high-achieving lifestyles, perfectionism, professional pressure, emotional suppression, and unrelenting performance standards, triggers a sustained activation of the sympathetic nervous system. This is your fight-or-flight system. In acute situations, it's life-saving. When chronically activated, it becomes a chemical assault on your cardiovascular system. Here's what happens at the molecular level. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, promotes visceral fat accumulation around the organs, increases blood glucose, raises blood pressure, promotes inflammatory cascades, and directly impairs endothelial function. Simultaneously, catecholamines like adrenaline and noradrenaline increase heart rate variability in destructive ways, creating microarrhythmias and increasing platelet aggregation, meaning your blood becomes more likely to clot. This is why the Wall Street trader who runs 10 kilometers every morning and eats a perfectly calibrated diet can still have a heart attack at 44. The exercise helps enormously, but it cannot fully counteract the chemical signature of chronic psychological stress if that stress is never properly processed. The perspective shift is this. Exercise is a deposit in the cardiac account, but chronic unprocessed stress is a withdrawal that often exceeds the deposit. You cannot outrun cortisol with kilometers. The practical exercise requires honesty. Take a piece of paper, or open a note on your phone, and rate on a scale of 1 to 10 these 4 dimensions of your life right now: sleep quality, emotional tension, sense of control over your time, and ability to rest without guilt. If 3 or more of those scores are below 6, your cardiac risk is higher than your fitness level suggests. Then implement what researchers call strategic recovery, not just sleep, but intentional nervous system deactivation, breathwork protocols, specifically the physiological sigh, double inhale through the nose, long exhale through the mouth, practiced for 5 minutes daily, has been shown in Stanford research to reduce cortisol and restore autonomic balance faster than any other non-pharmacological intervention. This is not soft wellness advice. This is biochemistry. The common assumption is that if your cholesterol is normal and you have no chest pain, your arteries are fine. This assumption kills people. Here is the scientific architecture of what's actually happening inside your arterial walls, and why standard testing misses it. Atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque inside the arteries, does not grow linearly. It can remain completely stable and clinically silent for decades. A person can have significant plaque burden in their coronary arteries and feel absolutely nothing. Run without symptoms, exercise without limitation, then without warning, a plaque that is not even large enough to obstruct blood flow significantly can rupture. When it ruptures, the body responds by sending platelets and clotting factors to seal the tear. And in that process, a clot forms that can completely block the artery within minutes. This is called a type 1 myocardial infarction, and it is the primary mechanism behind heart attacks in fit, apparently healthy individuals. The revealing detail: the most dangerous plaques are not the biggest ones. They are the most inflamed ones. A large, calcified, stable plaque can remain in place for years without rupturing. A small, soft, lipid-rich plaque under inflammatory stress can rupture suddenly and fatally. This is why a clean-looking stress test and a normal EKG are not enough to tell the story of your arterial health. The tests that actually reveal this story: coronary artery calcium score, CAC scan, a low-radiation CT scan that quantifies calcium deposits in the coronary arteries and provides a direct measure of plaque burden, CT coronary angiography with contrast, which can visualize both calcified and soft plaques, and carotid intima media thickness, CIMT ultrasound, which measures the thickness of the inner lining of the carotid arteries and is a validated surrogate marker for systemic atherosclerosis. The perspective change: your arteries are not just pipes. They are living tissue, reactive, dynamic, and capable of biological processes that don't announce themselves until the moment of crisis. Knowing your CAC score is the difference between assumption and information. The exercise: if you are over 40, have any family history of heart disease, or have more than 2 of the following: male sex, current or past smoking, hypertension, prediabetes, obesity, sedentary history, or chronic high stress. Ask your cardiologist specifically about a CAC score. In many countries, this is an out-of-pocket test that costs less than a premium gym membership. It is, without question, one of the most powerful pieces of cardiac information available. This is the point that most people miss entirely, and it may be the most important one. Here's what happens in the lives of apparently healthy individuals, particularly high-volume athletes. Years of intense endurance training, marathon running, triathlon, long-distance cycling, can, paradoxically, create structural and electrical changes in the heart. This is not an argument against exercise. Exercise is one of the most powerful cardiovascular protectors in existence. But it requires nuance, the science. The heart of an endurance athlete adapts magnificently. The chambers enlarge, the walls thicken, the resting heart rate drops, all beneficial adaptations. But decades of high-volume training can also, in a subset of individuals, often those with genetic predisposition, create areas of cardiac fibrosis, meaning scarring of the heart muscle tissue. Fibrosis disrupts the electrical conduction system. This creates a substrate for arrhythmias, abnormal heart rhythms. The most relevant here is ventricular fibrillation, which is chaotic, uncoordinated electrical activity in the lower chambers of the heart. VF produces no effective cardiac output. Loss of consciousness occurs within seconds. Without immediate defibrillation, death follows within minutes. This is the mechanism behind most cases of sudden cardiac death in athletes. But arrhythmias aren't only an athlete problem. Atrial fibrillation, the most common cardiac arrhythmia in the general population, increases the risk of stroke by 5 times and often produces no symptoms whatsoever. It is detected only if someone is wearing monitoring equipment when an episode occurs, which during a routine resting EKG is statistically unlikely. The perspective shift. Your heart's electrical system is as important as its mechanical function. A perfect pump with a chaotic electrical signal is still a life-threatening situation. The exercise. Ask your cardiologist about prolonged cardiac monitoring, specifically a 24-hour or 48-hour Holter monitor. If you have experienced any unexplained episodes of palpitations, dizziness, near fainting, or extreme fatigue during exercise, if you are a high-volume endurance athlete over the age of 35, ask specifically about cardiac MRI with gadolinium contrast, which can detect areas of fibrosis invisible to standard echocardiography. And if you exercise in groups, in gyms, or outdoors, know where the nearest automated external defibrillator is located. This is not paranoia. This is preparation. We've talked about inflammation. We've talked about genetics. We've talked about stress, about arterial plaque, about arrhythmias. 5 categories of invisible risk. 5 reasons why the person who looks the healthiest in the room can be the most vulnerable in ways that nobody, including that person, can see. But I want to leave you with something that goes beyond testing and biomarkers. Your heart was the first organ to form in your body. Before your brain had a single thought, before your lungs took their first breath, before you had a face or a voice or a name, your heart was already beating. It has been beating, without a single conscious instruction from you, every second of every day of your life. Through stress, through grief, through joy, through exhaustion, through every moment you forgot to be grateful, your heart never forgot its purpose. It chose to spend its entire life with you. And what I'm asking you to understand today, really understand, not just intellectually process, is that this heart deserves more than a once-a-year cholesterol check. It deserves your attention, your investigation, your willingness to look beyond the comfortable narrative of I exercise, therefore I'm safe. Every one of the 5 points we covered today, the inflammatory markers, the genetic factors, the stress chemistry, the arterial architecture, the electrical system, is a deposit or a withdrawal in what I want you to think of as a trust account. Every time you ignore a silent risk factor, you are making a withdrawal from a balance you can't see. Every time you ask the right questions, order the right tests, have the honest conversation with your doctor, you are making a deposit. And the account that matters is not your bank account or your retirement fund. It is the account your heart has been keeping for you, faithfully, since the very beginning. The question isn't whether you look healthy. The question is, what does your heart actually know that you don't? Think about that. And while you're thinking, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Share this video with someone you love who believes they're too healthy to need to worry. Because the most dangerous feeling in cardiovascular health isn't fear, it's false certainty.